Mohammed, I was struck by your column today, where you said there were several takeaways from the Fed's minutes, including the underscoring of the transitory nature of the slowdown we're seeing in the U.S. economy, also the impact of what's going on overseas and how that might affect Fed thinking. What was the biggest thing that stuck out to you from the minutes?
So a few things. First, the fact that they feel that the economy is okay, not great, but okay, that the weakness is transitory, as you say, and that the rest of the world is a bit of a problem. They're not worried at all about inflation, so they're neither worried about deflation or unstable and high inflation, but they are worried about financial instability. There was an interesting reference to the term premium, and they wanted to remind markets of the taper tantrum. And what that tells us is that they are trying to strike that balance between, on the one hand, not disrupting the economic recovery because it's fragile, but on the other hand, not encouraging excessive risk-taking.
Right.
And that's why they're going to embark on this unusual tightening. I call it the loosest tightening, to try and balance these two things.
Right, and I love the way you ended your column, Mohammed. I'm going to quote from it right now. You said, quote, "There will be nothing traditional or automatic about this cycle compared with previous ones. It will be known as the loosest tightening in the modern history of central banking." That is quite a statement, Mohammed.
Yes, I mean, normally we're used to the Fed starting a cycle, 25 basis points every meeting, up to 4 to 5%, and then they stop. This is going to be completely different. They're going to start, they're going to be conditional, meeting by meeting conditional. It will be a very shallow path. They will stop well below the historical averages, so it's going to look and feel very different.
Because they don't want to backtrack.
They don't want to backtrack, but also they're not confident about the full understanding of what's been going on. And this whole debate between, is it a secular stagnation, is it cyclical? And also, they don't want to disrupt markets too much. So they're going to have to be very responsive, and they're going to have to learn as they go along.
Mohammed, what are you telling clients right now if they want to play the what-if game with you and say, what if the Fed raises rates in September? What should they do right now?
So I don't have clients in my new role, so that's great. I think first we should assume that they will hike in September. That's the most probable. It's not 100%, but it is most probable. By the time they do that, they would have shifted the market to worrying less about the starting point and focusing more on what's going to be a very shallow path. If you are looking to interest rate determination, Europe is going to play a major role. So this is not going to be the traditional cycle in which the Fed influences hugely the whole of the yield curve. I think Europe is going to have a lot of say as to what happens to the U.S. yield curve.
Well, Mohammed, you know, someone who believes that the Fed has been late to this game is someone who was just at the Fed, Richard Fisher, right, of the Dallas Federal Reserve. I was with him a few days ago at the Fiscal Summit down in Washington, and he reiterated again that to him, this is a huge crisis in the making. I want you to listen, Mohammed, to what he said.
At some point, you have to pay the piper. And the real issue is what happens when interest rates go up. The CBO estimates have them just increasing gradually. Well, we've been suppressing the yield curve. Foreign buyers have been helping us suppress the yield curve. And I think this is the ticking time bomb of all.
Ticking time bomb, Mohammed. He believes that the Fed is not going to be able to do the shallow tightening that you just described.
Yeah, whether it's a time bomb, what I would call it is a historic bet. And basically what the Fed has done is by suppressing interest rates through the rate being at zero, through the QE that it finished in October, and through forward policy guidance, we have borrowed from the future two things.
Right.
We have borrowed growth from the future, and we have borrowed financial returns from the future. So if fundamentals do not validate all that, we're going to have to pay the piper, as he puts it. So the big bet is, can fundamentals validate what we have borrowed from the future in terms of growth and in terms of returns? He's worried. He's saying, you know what, that's not going to happen. I think it's 50-50, Betty.
You think it's 50-50? But what happens, though, Mohammed? I mean, how does the Fed control yields going from 2.2% here on the 10-year to something like 4 or 4.5, which we could see if we don't control this in 12 months.
Well, it's not going to happen in 12 months. I can tell you that. And the reason why is that, first, the economy is not that strong. Secondly, they are not going to hike interest rates aggressively. Third, Europe puts a dampening effect on interest rates here. So we're not going to get to 4 and over 4% in 12 months.
Well,
right?
I mean, as long as the bond markets behave, Mohammed, we just saw a little bit of a tantrum, right?
I think you're pointing to something that's really important, and that a growing number of central banks are warning the markets about. Markets are not listening, but central banks are warning, which is liquidity risk. What they're saying is when the paradigm for policy changes, there will not be as much market liquidity as investors expect, i.e., investors will not be able to reposition themselves as quickly and as cost-effectively as they wish. And we've seen that warning come from Fed officials, from the Bank of England, and most recently from the ECB.